Very good to see all of you today. Every time over the last few weeks that I have not actually written down what I wanted to say, I just kind of go off on tangents. I think it's just, I'm getting old, that's what happens. But I really wanted, I couldn't take the time to write this out, so I'm going to basically speak off the cuff and try and keep my remarks pretty focused. I was given the task of looking at the nature of Hawaiian political organization and resistance since the Bannock Constitution and up until the middle part of the territory, or the early part of statehood. Because all of the people here on this panel have been really long-time activists in the Hawaiian movement. When it begins, first of all, as a movement to hold on to land and to maintain communities in their places, like in Kalama Valley. Soli Niheo was there, Terry Kiko'olani and Soli were there at Waihole Waikane protecting farmers' rights. They were doing this in the 1960s and the 1970s, and they're going to be speaking about those kinds of things, as well as other things. What I want to talk about is actually an earlier time when Uncle Kekuni was growing up, and talk a little bit about this, what happens to Hawaiian identity in my opinion. And again, please do remember that a lot of this is sort of the way I look at this as a historian. What happens to Hawaiian identity and what happens to the way in which we create places where we can be independent, where we can be Hawaiian on the land during the territorial period. The 1887 Constitution, the Bayonet Constitution, was, in the opinion of just about every Hawaiian who understood politics, which is just about every Hawaiian, was a slap in the face, and it was really a kind of a wake-up call that the government that they had created, that Kameme had created for them, that Kauikeauli had put together in a constitution, that generation upon generation of Hawaiian had enhanced and protected and strengthened to protect Native Hawaiians on the land, that this government could be taken over by foreigners. It could be, and it was, in 1887. Now, the fact that the people who took it over were also subjects of the Queen, of the King, were also citizens, doesn't change the fact that even at that point, Kanaka Maoli drew very distinct lines between Kanaka Maoli citizens and citizens who are not Kanaka Maoli. And increasingly, we were drawing lines between those who favored the continuation of an independent Hawaii and those who threatened it. And by 1887, everybody knew who the threats were. They were the ones who took over in 1887. Lauren Thurston, Sanford Dole, that horrible cabinet that was set up to control the king, which included Clarence Ashford and others. Hawaiians' response to this, at first, was to consider boycotting any kind of participation in that government. And I still remember reading about these large rallies that were held in Hilo and also here in Kalihi at Kaumakapili Church, in which Hawaiian legislators, politicians, got up and debated whether or not they should sign an oath of allegiance to this new constitution, which they knew was heva, which they knew was wrong, which they knew had already robbed them of political power, whether they should sign up to be citizens under it so that they could continue to participate, or whether they should turn their faces to it, against it. And to a certain extent, over the next 4 or 5 years, that's what the conversations were about. They didn't really want to support it, but they were so attached still to the rule of law that they felt that if they didn't, they could not participate. Now, the exception to this is that in 1889, Robert Wilcox leads a small detachment of men, about 50 men, to Iolani Palace to confront the king and get him to sign back into existence the old Constitution, right? Now, this is an attempt at it's a military response. It is a planned response. It went very badly, but it wasn't stupid. His intention was, and he believed that Kalakaua would be there. He believed that if Kalakaua was confronted with guns, that Kalakaua would have to sign back into existence the Constitution that he had overturned with his signature when he had been faced with guns in 1887. So he wasn't there. Worse, he refused to come there. And so eventually the government, the bayonet government, sent troops. They took the positions up on the rooftops. They picked off Wilcox's men. They wounded him. They killed several. They tried him for treason. He was found not guilty by a native jury, and that was that. Wilcox will try this again right after the overthrow, 1895. Again, a military response because the law does not appear to be working. And here is the point I want to make. Hawaiians in the 1880s, 1890s, and right up into the early 20th century are very familiar with the law. They're familiar with electoral politics. They know how democracy is supposed to work. They grew up that way, right? Since the 1850s, they have been effective legislators. They know what they're doing. And that what they're trying to do is get back, in that whole period, even after the overthrow, they're trying to get back to a government and to a country and to a nation state that is independent, that will guarantee their rights, and under which they can participate as citizens who elect, who go to legislatures, who make law, who participate under law. When those things don't work, they take out guns. In 1895, they took out guns in response to the fact that the Republic had declared itself a government in 1894. And you guys have heard about this, I'm sure, already. They took out guns. They were betrayed by traitors and by spies. And again, Wilcox found himself on the other side of a gun. They chased him up into these hills here. Eventually, they got him. And they tried him for treason again. They tried, there were 600 people who participated, and a large number of them were given or were threatened with either life sentences or the death penalty. Wilcox is one of those people that absolutely refused to testify against anyone else and basically dared them to kill him. They wound up pardoning him and virtually everyone else that they had convicted. But in some ways, the two failed military attempts may have convinced many Hawaiians that the only thing that they could do and was in some way to find their way back to the law. And in 1900, when the United States occupied and created this fake government, the territory, for the kingdom, many Hawaiians at that point decided that the thing to do was to create a political party that would take over the legislature. The territorial legislature that was set up by the US government looked a lot like other territorial legislatures that America had overseen. There was a Senate, there was a House of Representatives, they made laws. The governor, however, was appointed by the President of the United States, and the governor had the ability to overturn any legislature through veto. However, in the territorial legislature, the governor could be overridden by a 2/3 majority vote. And the Home Rule legislature of 1900 to 1902 came within just a few votes of having the 2/3 majority necessary to overturn the governor's vetoes. The governor vetoed something like 16 bills, I think that's what I remember, in that 2-year period. The Home Rule representatives, and this is really kind of an interesting thing, the kind of legislation that they did